Firefighters, they're the parts of us that come when the feelings get too hot. They come in to cool them down. So classic firefighting, people who cut, people who burn themselves. So self-harm types of behaviors. Or it could be actually the opposite. I'm feeling so numb, I have to feel something. Okay. And so they'll cut and they'll feel something. Addiction, classic firefighter. Douse it with alcohol, douse it with drugs. So if you can think that way, that the feelings are too painful, these exiles are starting to break through, and the protectors are going, we're never going to feel that way again. We're not going to deal with that again. So their job is to make sure that you never feel that pain, shame, humiliation, guilt, lonely, whatever it is, again.
Welcome to episode 46. This is Unlatched Mind. My guest today is Adina Bank-Lees. Adina was on back in June of 2019. That was episode 9. So Adina's back. We've been trying to get another episode on the books for quite a while, so I'm glad we can lock it in. Today we talk about internal family systems. It's kind of a neat little paradigm where just trying to summarize it in like a sentence. You know, it's almost like if you think about kind of you're born, you start off pure, life traumas sort of infiltrate and get in there, right? And then IFS sort of describes your brain's reaction and response to all those traumas with protectors and all these quote unquote parts, which we talked through. It's a neat way of framing some of the stuff we all go through and some of the things that happen later in life that you're wondering why they might be there. Anyway, so with that, let's just jump in. I'll give you Adina Bank-Lees. I had a great conversation last time we spoke, so I'm glad we can do it again. I guess you going back and forth with ideas and topics for discussion. You brought up this internal family systems, and I dug into it, and I think it's fascinating. And now I don't have much to compare it to. Like all the other paradigms stink, but this one seems awesome because it made a lot of sense to me. It really did. I started digging into it going and of course, when you read stuff like this, I mean, I do this, I'm sure most people do, you start reflecting on your life, your childhood, the way you see the world. And I was like, yes, check. Yep. So I felt like I know my exiles, my managers, my firefighter. I can just feel it. Now, maybe that's just, me in my head just making everything work. But I guess to start off, what the heck is it? What is IFS?
Well, I think, in reading your notes, I think you wrote some of the best notes I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you.
Describing it.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
No question.
Cool.
So IFS is a model of psychotherapy that Dr. Richard Schwartz developed back in the late 80s, very early 90s. And if you ever listen to him, he tells this story that he was trained as a very classic family therapist in what's called structural and strategic family therapy, where you look at a family and you look at the roles people are in, and you help to shake up those roles, to shake up the family system when there's difficulty. And he was seeing the clients who had eating disorders, and females mostly. And what we know in treatment is when you deal with people with eating disorders, you have to deal with the family system because the eating disorder is so much tied up into the family dynamics. And what he continued to hear from these women that would come back to session week after week, after he would give a suggestion like, okay, so if you want to throw up, when you want to throw up in terms of their bulimia, you do, you journal instead. You call somebody and talk to them instead. And he would give suggestions. And they would come back and they would say, I know you suggested this, but there was a part of me that just said, F it, I'm doing this anyway. Like there was just a part of me that took over. And he was really listening. And I think that's what's good about him is he's a listener. And he said, there's something about parts when people would talk about a part of me feels this way, a part of me feels this way.
Right.
And he said, there's something to this parts thing. And so he really listened to his clients and came to develop this model. And IFS is a model that normalizes and tells us that multiplicity is normal in human psychological development. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that all of us have parts of ourselves. That's totally normal. Does it mean we all have what we used to call multiple personality disorder? Now, since the DSM-4, so that's the 90s sometime.
94, I think, yeah.
Late 90s.
Yeah.
It's called dissociative identity disorder, DID. Okay. And what Richard Schwartz says is, no, it doesn't mean that. However, we all have parts, and from his experience and the research now that is out, and I saw you wrote some questions about MRIs and it's just, that we all have these parts, and all of us dissociate. I kind of look at it as a continuum, but it's not necessarily that linear. But this is how I talk to people about it. So at the very end of the continuum, dissociation can be daydreaming. So all of us remember sitting in a classroom probably, and the teacher's going, like Charlie Brown, wow, 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 wow. We don't hear the teacher and we're somewhere else. I did that a lot.
Yeah.
That's dissociating. I'm not in the present moment. I'm not fully in the present moment. So my body's there, but my mind is somewhere else. I think we could all relate to that.
Sure, yeah.
Does that mean I have a psychological disorder? Not necessarily, because a psychological disorder means that it negatively impacts my functioning in one or many more parts of my life, work, relationships, whatever. So if I daydream once in a while, okay. And what we know about neurobiology, Vinny, at this point, if you look at infants when they are bonding and even, feeding or bonding with caregivers, the infant will make eye contact for just so many seconds, and then they look away because their nervous system gets stimulated enough, and the nervous system itself says, enough, we got to look away and get a break.
Interesting.
And if the caregiver, and you may have seen this with your kids, I saw it with my son, if the caregiver can deal with that and kind of know that and not say, wait, look at me, and pressure that nervous system to keep contact and keep stimulation, the nervous system will develop in a very healthy way to be able to regulate itself so it doesn't get too anxious. It just that when I'm full, I look away. So dissociation, right? If we daydream, it's where we've had enough, we got to leave somewhere. Disorder is, again, just to say it, disorder is when it negatively impacts and I have negative consequences in areas of my life and I can't function well. So if I daydream, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I've driven away from a gas station and I've gone, did I put the pump back or did I leave it? I don't remember turning the cap.
Yep.
My body was doing stuff automatically and my brain was thinking about something else. So that's very classic dissociation, but not pathological dissociation.
Yep.
So if we go up the continuum, just tell me, are you following me so far?
100%. Yeah. I can't help but think about it. And I feel like it's as I've gotten older. So you're reassuring me that maybe it's not me just losing my mind, but it's happening more now where I'll be in the, all the stuff my dad used to say is like, I'm like, what the hell did I just do? Why do I have my keys in my hand? I'm like, oh wait, I was leaving. So yeah, 100%.
You walk into the room and you go, why am I here?
Yeah, but it's funny. You can always track why that happened. I'm like, oh, because I started thinking about work again, and I was immersed in some work conversation or some meeting where it was frustrating and whatever anxiety was speaking, and I was doing things on autopilot, have no record of doing them. No memory of doing them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I love what you just said. Well, let me just take a little tangent here.
Yeah.
When you said, yeah, and I was thinking about something, and anxiety kind of took over. And so anxiety literally puts us in the part of our brain that's not our thinking brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's not our decision-making brain. It puts us in what's called the limbic system,
Mm-hmm.
which is the feeling part of our brain where we have sensations, we have emotions, we have other memories, like our five senses. Think about it that way.
Yeah.
That's where our five senses are. And when we're in anxiety and then anxiety goes up, there are stress hormones that get started. One of them is called cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
Another one's epinephrine or adrenaline. And when we're there, the research has shown that there is less blood flow to our thinking brain called the prefrontal cortex. So our thinking really does go offline, and we aren't present the way we need to be. And that's why you go, oh, well, what happened? I just shorted out. Like my brain shorted out. I don't know what.
Well,
because
so
it did.
yeah. So I on that note, I want you to weigh in here because I've always been going through like, not really high school because I was really good at school. College, I started getting everyone's like, oh, I'm not a good test taker. And I used to call BS on that. I was not a good test taker. I just wasn't. But I seemed to know all the stuff, but my anxiety would peak so bad. And I didn't know what it was. I just thought, oh, whatever. I'm just not getting the stuff, or I didn't study hard enough, or I'm slacking, which is that was true too a little bit. But I would get such sweaty palms during a test. I still have nightmares today about like going to sleep and then taking some test, and I wasn't going to graduate, and I couldn't because I'm looking at the clock and I'm looking at I kept breaking my pencil, and then my heart's racing, and I look over and everyone's done, and I was on page 1 of like 7. I mean, and that was literally my life in college, and I was like, wow, maybe not being a good test taker is a thing. Or even today, if you're looking over my shoulder, like at work, not so much now, but when I was younger, my hand, I couldn't really type well. Like I'm a software guy, so writing software is what we we started our careers doing. I couldn't. As soon as you left, I was fine. I was typing a mile a minute. But if you're looking at me, the anxiety, or like my parents in the stadium when I was playing baseball, I'd get nervous. If they couldn't make a game, I did so much better. It's like because I'm an overthinking person, and that like I feel that anxiety affects. You're right. I feel like it just. And this is good because I have clinical backing to my non-test taking ability now. So I'm going to.
Oh, you totally.
She told me it's. But it seemed very real.
Classic examples. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is very real, Vinny. And they have for the Americans with Disabilities Act, when kids have high anxiety, they can now have adaptations. What do they call them? I don't know, adaptations or exceptions for them that they can do. They can take tests differently because it's not about them not knowing the material. You knew the material. It was about the anxiety that shorted out your brain.
Yeah, I guess there's a fine line there between excuse making too, which I always kind of like, it's like what's real and who needs the help and who's just looking for an excuse. Like, because I would say, I say this on all my podcasts, but I kind of grew up a little bit old school, and it's like, well, if you could take separate tests in college or school because your brain's maybe not ready for it, but then you're going to enter the real world, and it's going to slap you around. So you should get used to, being able to, I guess there's a trade-off there, because life's not going to let you take different courses or different work, or your life's going to attack you the same way, whether or not your brain's ready or not, sort of thing. So it's like I always feel that, excuse making versus. I don't know.
Well, I hear what you're saying about growing up old school, and what I could say to that is, it makes sense, and that people do learn differently, and people do have that, and so to be able to make room for people who learn differently and people who have
100%.
Difficulties, I think is really important, and for people to learn skills, and that's some of what we do is, okay, so let's say, you have ADHD, let's say, and you don't think the same, and and you have to deal in the real world. So what are the strategies, and with anxiety as well, what are the strategies for you to use so that you can function in the real world, and to teach people strategies for that? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the old school, if they dismissed a lot of things, maybe from lack of understanding, or they just didn't have the time, and whatever it might be, they dismissed too many things. And I always wonder, what can we need to bring forward the good of the old school, the good, but mature past that baggage, that, just mature past it. And I think you just articulated like a good example of that. Yeah. Just learn some coping.
Yes. And there are so many, and so many clients of mine who grew up with in our time, you're younger than me. So my time and younger, where they didn't diagnose dyslexia. They didn't diagnose ADHD. They didn't diagnose some of these things, and kids were termed lazy.
Yeah.
They were just behaving badly. They didn't get the support that they needed, and so they didn't succeed in ways they could have. The self-esteem. I mean, I work with people all the time. Their self-esteem was totally crushed. And so they underachieved because they didn't, I'm stupid. I was told I was stupid. I'd never amount to anything. And not true. They had learning disabilities, et cetera, that nobody knew about then.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. It's not about making excuses. It's about getting correct diagnoses and assessments and being able to get people what they need.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was a good tangent. I'm glad.
Yeah. Sorry. No, it's going to happen the whole time. So
that's good.
It's roll with it. Yeah. That makes it fun. Yeah. Yeah. So I interrupted you when you were going through what I guess IFS actually is.
So I actually remember what we were talking about, which is good. Maybe I'm not.
That means you were present. You weren't daydreaming.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. If I say at any point I look at you and say, "What was I talking about?" Then you know that that's not good.
I'll do that too. So we're on the continuum of dissociation, talking about this as Richard Schwartz would talk about. I'll give you the overall statement. The earlier trauma happens to someone and overwhelms their nervous system, because that's what trauma is. Trauma is about experience that overwhelms the nervous system, and the nervous system cannot process it. So it has other ways to cope, we'll put it that way, right?
Yeah.
So the earlier the trauma happens, the less ability a human being has to cope in a rational way, because their brain is not developed that way yet. And the longer it goes on, the more it is necessary for what we call primitive coping mechanisms to happen. So not, let me think about this and maybe I'll just do something else, or maybe I'll get out of here. No, as a young child, you're kind of trapped in the situation, and you have to come up internally with ways to cope. So Schwartz says, the earlier the trauma happens, the longer it goes on, the more distinct parts develop in our personality in order to cope with that overwhelming stimulation.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's IFS.
Yeah.
And
that makes sense.
You and I can give some personal examples of that if we want, and I can give some client examples of that.
Yeah.
Which will kind of make it, it'll make it more real for your listeners.
Yeah, make it tangible. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go there.
So,
sure.
So let me say a few things about that. This continuum. So here we are at one end of the continuum where we're talking about daydreaming and leaving the gas cap in and not remembering, and my car goes right to work and I don't remember making the left turn. Like it just goes there. It just goes home. So if I start getting in car accidents, then there's a problem. But for the most part, and if we move up the continuum, we have something called post-traumatic stress disorder, where classic example is you have a Vietnam veteran. He's walking down the street and there's a car that either backfires or honks really loudly. And he hunches down, he's on the pavement, and he's thinking that there's a bomb going off, and he's hearing shots, and he's back in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
You say, what the heck is that? Okay. That's dissociation in a whole nother way, which means I leave the present moment. I'm not in 2021 here. I'm back in 1969 in another place and time.
Right.
And that is very real. And I see it all the time, Vinny, with people. I work with veterans who in a residential treatment program who really have a difficult time staying in the present moment because of, and we're talking about not Vietnam, some of them are Vietnam, but really most of them now are Iraq War from the early 2000s into the middle 2000s, and 4 tours and 5 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the kinds of things they've seen and experienced, and the deaths, and I could go on, right? So talk about overwhelming for your nervous system. So literally being in another place and time and not knowing where you are is very scary.
Yeah.
And that's a dissociative episode. That's what we call it, a dissociative episode, where you're not in 2021 on October 10th, at 9:25 Pacific Standard Time, a.m.
Yeah.
And that's your limbic system again. That's when your thinking brain is not on board. You're in total survival mode. You're in the limbic system, which is in the center back part of your brain. You're also in your brain stem, which is at the bottom, right near your neck. And that is your survival, fight, flight part of your brain. I have a client who went through pretty significant childhood trauma of physical abuse and mental torture, I would say. And she continues to have flashbacks to this day. Unfortunately, I think she has the most stubborn PTSD I've ever seen. We've tried many things, and it hasn't moved very much. And so there are times when she'll be just kind of sitting in her house, and she'll end up in the bathroom on the floor crying. And she says, what happened? She had another flashback to an incident, and it's pretty common. The thing that she goes back to is a very severe traumatic incident for her. I don't want to speak specifically, but so she kind of comes out of it and she says, what the heck happened? Oh my God, I was there again. I was 8 years old again. And it feels exactly the same as it did when she was 8. And here she is in her 50s.
Wow.
This is pure dissociation. And I want people to know that this is real. Nobody's making this up. It is debilitating. It's scary. Most of the time, it's very treatable. This is somebody who's kind of an anomaly for me in working with someone who has this persistence over time, but it's real. And what we used to call multiple personality disorder, DID, is real. People dismiss it. We can talk about that in a minute. So my client has PTSD. She has all those criteria. So she has those dissociative episodes where she thinks she's somewhere else. She loses time, which is another part of dissociation. So what happened to the last half an hour? What happened to the last 2 hours? I have no idea where I was. Another common thing. And this is all from trauma, which again is overwhelming to the nervous system and gets processed and gets held and stored in this limbic system part of our brain and can kind of break through to our regular functioning and really mess us up. This relates to IFS.
I was going to say just to put categorize where we are. Is this one of the firefighters? This is dissociative protectors. Is that where we're sort of circling around?
We're talking about dissociative protectors, yes. And so for your audience, what I want to say is that so right now for IFS, as we said, we all have those parts. And IFS says that we have parts called exiles. We'll talk about the self in a minute, but exiles that are all the memories, all the pain, and some parts can carry the shame, and some parts carry fear, and some parts carry shame and fear, and some parts carry guilt. I mean, it really depends upon the individual's system, internal system. That's why he calls it internal family, because you have an internal family there. So your internal system and what your internal system needed to do in order to survive and cope with those experiences of overwhelm. And so the exiles, so let's say for this particular client, an exile is her 8-year-old who experienced specific traumatic events, And her system organized for her to protect her from ever feeling those feelings again because they were so painful. So she had parts, we call them protectors. And protectors, there are two types of protectors or three types of protectors. One is a manager, one is a firefighter, right? The managers are the ones that keep us busy, like you wrote down in this note. They keep us busy. They keep us doing things.
Right.
So she was a fantastic worker. I mean, fantastic worker. And fantastic at doing things around the house and was always busy doing things.
Yeah.
And was very good at it and very accomplished in what she was doing. Mm-hmm. She also was very much a caretaker of others and was what felt responsible for others, so was doing for them and functioning at a very high level in that way. Firefighters, they're the parts of us that come when the feelings get too hot. They come in to cool them down. So classic firefighting, people who cut, people who burn themselves. So self-harm types of behaviors. This needs to just, this needs to calm down. Or it could be actually the opposite. I'm feeling so numb, I have to feel something. Okay. And so they'll cut and they'll feel something. Addiction, classic firefighter. Douse it with alcohol, douse it with drugs. So if you can think that way, that the feelings are too painful, these exiles are starting to break through and the protectors are going, we're never going to feel that way again. We're not going to deal with that again. So their job is to make sure that you never feel that pain, shame, humiliation, guilt, lonely, whatever it is, again. And they are clear, they are determined, they're serious about doing their job. And they don't know there's any other options of how to do it except drink, except cut, except binge and purge, except, right? Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. It almost makes too much sense. I want to just, you want to just take this to everyone and say, please listen, just this, it just seems like it's again, I'm going to my own. I'm lucky enough not to have some of these really harmful behaviors, but I can feel like I'm always super busy, and I'm like I know I have some of these traits, and like I think I've been able to keep them positive, and I'm always busy, I'm always doing stuff, I'm addicted to working out and exercise, but I see it everywhere, right? So I can absolutely see, and everyone they all. There's some spectrum of these traits, and you can see this mechanism at play.
We all have them.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Now, is this the brain? It seems like this is just the brain's. It's all survival, right? So evolution, like your brain is just trying to protect you, right? Is that all? And it's all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it all is. It's trying to protect you. So it's not about I'm a bad person. It's not about I have to kill off these parts. I work a lot with addiction. And I have to kill off the addict. Like if I could get rid of the addict, I'll be okay. And Schwartz says, this is not what it's about. You can't kill off any of your parts. What is most important is that you stay curious about them and you develop somewhat of a relationship with them to find out, what are you protecting me from?
Yeah.
Can I stay curious about that? What are you afraid of would happen to me if you weren't doing your job?
Yeah.
Of trying to protect me. What would you be scared of happening to me? And, are you willing to kind of soften and step to the side a little bit as I'm talking to my protector, right?
Yeah.
So that maybe some of these other skills that I'm learning from my therapist or whatever, that I could practice these and see, maybe you can get a coffee break, maybe you can get a vacation. Maybe you don't have to work so hard anymore.
Yeah, firefighter, put down the hose for a second. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. And so Schwartz talks about trauma as the burdens that we carry, the burdens of the pain and shame, etc., and the memories, the flashbacks, the memories of those things, and how we are unburdening these parts, we're taking the burden. I think of a burden as a big sack on my back, right? Yeah. So I'm carrying this up a mountain, like, oh my God. And this work helps me to take a little bit out at a time, so it's not so heavy, so that I can have my spontaneity, I can have some fun, I can live life the way you're talking about. I'm still a human. I'm going to do some of these things, but they're not going to weigh me down, and they're not going to ruin my life, and they're not going to be the focus of my life.
Now, do you see this manifest itself in people that you see that maybe had seemingly normal childhoods? I mean, I feel like so much goes back to our parenting, the upbringing you go through. I feel like the first question I think folks like you always ask, and maybe it's a cliche, I don't know, but hey, tell me about your childhood, right? That's kind of the first cliche thing. Folks like I, always just think that's what
right.
Therapy starts with, but for good reason, obviously. But do you see? Is it because as I was going through this, it almost was like, I think it's like the self is defined as like this. You want your body, you want to be led by the self. The self is that's where the untethered, like untraumatized you is almost. And then you're kind of start off pure, and then life's traumas, most likely as a child, screw you all up, and you have all these things, these protectors that come out. Is that, I mean, in the most basic layman sense, I guess we all go through some level of trauma. Some of us is super severe. Others are just kind of, maybe it's just in the noise, and, maybe it's more mental. Some of it's really explicit and physical. But I guess what I'm getting at is, do you have to go through notable trauma for this really to manifest itself, these symptoms, these things, or is it more nuanced than that?
I think it's that continuum again. I think it's the nuance. I think what Schwartz is saying is we all develop this way because we all have experiences, no matter what it is, that could overwhelm our nervous system.
Yeah.
And it could be, Vinny, it could be as simple as my needs didn't get met. Like I felt neglected, or I felt like my mom, I'll just make this up, my mom didn't hear me when I was really feeling sad and a first breakup of my relationship or something like that. And I could have felt like, wow, I really needed her in that moment and she wasn't there. That doesn't mean I'm a traumatized person. What it could mean is that there was something that happened in my nervous system. And there's a part of me that went, wait a second, whoa, this is a big hurt here. This is a hurt for me.
Yeah.
And how are we going to organize around that? Well, you know what? I may not be talking to my mom about some sensitive stuff now, because what I've learned is she might not be there for me. And so there's some hurt there, and there's a protector that just showed up.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna take the risk to go there and be vulnerable with mom about this kind of stuff. So there's a protector there. And that could end up generalizing, depending on my experience, to other people. And like, you know what? I think I'm just going to keep that kind of stuff to myself, and I won't be putting that out there to others. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to be in inpatient treatment and therapy for the next 25 years. But I'm just giving you an example of how that might impact my trust and have some protectors show up.
Right. Well, it does kind of bring awareness of the fact that it's not this. It doesn't have to be these big traumatic moments that make the news, right? Like little,
No.
individual, like you said, the spectrum, right? This continuum. It could be very low on the dramatic scale, but still have these incremental effects. I mean,
it could be very impactful. And we're finding more and more, this research started sometime in the 40s, 50s. It's called attachment research. The gentleman who's kind of the father of attachment theory is John Bowlby, Bowlby. And they are looking at brains, and I can't quote you studies and stuff like that, which I would like to. I wish I would have had more time to research this, but I didn't. But attachment, they're finding, is the critical piece of brain development. And I can give you a couple of names of people to look up. Okay. Dr.
Sure.
Bruce Perry is, he just came out with a book with Oprah. So it's kind of in the pop culture now, and it's called What Happened. I think it's called What Happened to You. So it's not about what's wrong with me. It's about what happened to me and what meaning did I make of it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so my brain just shorted out. So help me. Where were we? We were talking about attachment. Okay.
Bruce Perry's book. Yeah.
Bruce Perry. Right. So in
hey, are you daydreaming on me?
I am. I lost it. When I talk about Bruce Perry, I just want to talk about Bruce Perry and just keep talking about him.
That's right.
He's one of my heroes.
Nice save.
So it starts in utero, literally, and they're finding this. So again, we know that the baby lives inside the mom. The baby shares blood with the mom through the placenta. The baby picks up emotionally what's going on with mom. And if remember that emotions are energy, emotions are neurotransmitters. I mean, all of this goes biologically, and the baby's picking up on all of that. So if mom is stressed during pregnancy, the baby is stressed and has those levels of hormones going in, and that's going to impact their brain development. If mom is a victim of domestic violence, I mean, we could go on and on, right? If whatever that is, the baby's impacted, the nervous system is impacted. Let's say the mom's pregnancy is fantastic, the baby's wanted, all of that stuff, and mom gets postpartum depression. There's a break in that bond. Mom can't. She's not capable. She can't do the eye contact. She can't feed the baby like that. She can't. The nervous system of the baby is impacted by that because the baby needs to bond and have the mom there. We go, well, what about the dad and the grandmother? Absolutely. That's what mitigates significant, like major functional impact. If there are other adults that the baby can bond with, we need that. We need more than one parent, right? We need more. However, the mother is the person the baby was inside of, was symbiotic with.
Yeah, you can't replace the
mom.
Can't. You could try and help, but there's nothing. Yeah,
you can't.
Mom, yeah.
And that impacts. You say, well, the baby doesn't remember that, and so being loved by somebody else, whatever. Sorry, you can't replace the mom. The baby's nervous system is impacted by that.
Yeah.
How much it's impacted and how it shows up later, we don't know, but it is. And this is what Dr. Gabor Mate is talking about also in terms of trauma and how we are impacted and how trauma can show up in many different ways in terms of addiction, et cetera. So it's important for us to pay attention to this attachment to our parenting. Parenting education is so critically important. And another person in the field, Dr. Daniel J. Siegel, has many parenting books out because what he says is, if you have depression or anxiety or you have your own trauma, that's going to show up in your parenting, and it's going to impact the bond and the attachment that you make with your kids. And so generationally, it just passes down from one to another. So I don't want to give a fatalistic view to your listeners that, oh, we're all doomed, forget it, What I do want to say, though, is we all have our own forms of trauma, emotional, attachment-wise, et cetera. Kids are bullied. I was bullied as a kid. I mean, we go on. We all have our forms. And when we have at least one, this again, the research is saying at least one healthy, what we call secure attachment with an adult, it's our safe place. We know we can go there. We're unconditionally loved.
Yeah.
It's grandma, it's a teacher, we can make it through.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's scary to think how many children around the world don't have that, right? We're all humans, and we just think, we think cozy U.S., and we all, you just think like that. But then you look across the world, and there's so many, and those children of all races and genders and whatever, they all need the same thing. They're all the same species.
That's
they
right.
need mom.
Exactly.
Everything we just said, and I forget that a lot because you seems like another world sometimes. I think, oh well, they're just used to the chaos and. Maybe they're better at adapting to it, but there's some craziness out there. And it also brings home a little bit, no one doesn't know this, but how important parenting is and how important it is to prune the family tree when when this baggage you grew up with, you got to trim that. You got to do whatever work is needed not to bring that to your children, your family, and your home. And you're right, it is very nuanced sometimes. And I've had to grow a lot in that way. Just thinking about, we had kids, they're 6 and 8 now. So we've had time to sort of reflect, and, I'm blessed and lucky that my wife and I are very similar, where the kids are paramount. That's the number one priority, right? It's just, but it's, you catch yourself, you have to be very self-aware. You catch yourself, oh, that's what my dad used to do. Oh crap, that's how my dad used to interact with my mom, right? You can ask my wife, why would I say that? I'll call her in here. No, but she, like I said it like you knew her. I remember, she'll tell you I'm hyper aware, even raising my voice in front of the kids. Now I do slip here and there, and occasionally I'll drop an F-bomb.
Thank you. I'm glad you do.
But almost to a point where I'll be like, please don't let them. I don't want them hearing you and I talk, even if we're talking quietly. If there's sort of aggression in the voice, like, why did you do this? Even if the volume's low, I'm like, they're gonna feel that. Like, and I remember, and it sounds sort of cliche, but I zoom back to I remember that feeling. And when mom and dad weren't 100%, and when mom and dad weren't in sync and happy, which, growing up, it was often not the case that they were together. They were very at each other's necks a lot. It felt very unsafe. I remember that feeling of feeling unsafe, because who are you gonna, as a kid, that's it. You're not going to run out of the house to like neighbors. That's your little. It's like it's supposed to be safe here, and then the rest of the world's trying to kill us. It's like, so when it's not safe there, it's like, whoa, now what? My teddy bear. What do kids have, right? And I know many kids had it worse than I did for sure. But so I see that, where I always want them to know, hey, this is it. This is a safe place. No matter what, mommy, daddy love each other. We love you. I do the cliche thing where, like, and my wife's good at this too. Is like, oh, let them see us hug and kiss a lot. Even when, like, ew, mommy, no, hey, I love you, mom.
Doesn't matter.
I love, yeah. And it's just like, and again, we're far from perfect, but things like that, the reflecting on, just pruning that family tree stuff, bringing the good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff too, right? You want to bring some of those old school, strong, get up, work hard, stuff that I feel like is sort of waning too. But there's a lot of crap that left unchecked, I would have brought it right here. And it'd be 2021, and the next generation is being brought up with that same crap. Right, and so, I mean, good for your field, but I'm sure that's not what you want. So,
right, there's always gonna be clients for me. I know that because we're human, and what I tell people, and I really appreciate what you're sharing, Vinny, is we can kind of we can begin to stop the cycle.
Yeah.
We can begin to stop the cycle. It can stop. And I did the same thing. I said, I want to take what's really good from the parenting that I got, because I got a lot of good stuff.
Yep,
and I don't want to take what didn't work for me. And so I did a lot of education and being in my field. And I did a lot of that so that I made decisions about how to raise my son in a lot of ways differently than I was raised, in a lot of ways the same that I was raised, which it sounds like that's what you and your wife are doing.
Yeah.
And I think this piece you brought up about safety is the core. If I don't feel safe enough, and I put safe enough, if I don't feel safe enough, that's when those chemicals start. That's when the cortisol and the adrenaline go, and my fight or flight comes in. And that's affecting my nervous system, and that's the trauma. Mm-hmm. That's when the protectors start. Because if I don't feel safe, just think about it. If I don't feel safe, I have to protect.
Right.
I have to.
Yeah.
So it could be that mom and dad are fighting. It doesn't have to be anybody touched me. You remember that unsafe. That is burned into your nervous system. Mm-hmm. And kids aren't going to get it 100%. I think what our job is also is to help them know they're not going to have it 100%, but what skills can we teach them? Can we model for them? And can we teach them about how to regulate their nervous system? That's the term. So when they are upset and having feelings or feeling scared, how do they soothe and calm themselves?
Right.
And the way that they learn how to do that is by watching us and experiencing us. So, for example, a kid falls and hurts themselves. and I mean really hurts themselves. There were times Ian would fall and I would just go, "Oh my God, honey." And he'd just get back up and it was fine.
Right, yeah.
And if I was making a big deal out of it, then he'd start crying.
Exactly,
And then,
yeah.
but I knew when he was hurt and when he wasn't hurt, And so when he was hurt, of course, I would go over to him or I'd say, "Come over here," and I'd hold him.
Right.
And we'd breathe together and I would say, "You're okay." And he'd cry and I would just hold him. Right. I don't do a lot of patting on the back. It's okay. Because for me, in my experience was I got that a lot. And the message for me was, don't feel that way. Like it wasn't okay to feel that hurt or cry. Didn't want to give that to my son. Wanted him to know he could. And in my breathing slowly and deeply with him and saying, "I'm here and you're okay," because he was okay. You're okay.
Right.
He was able to use my nervous system to help him calm his nervous system. Does this make sense?
Yeah, interesting.
And that's for little ones. That's what we have to do. And if I'm in my trauma, I can't manage those feelings. They get me so upset. I can't be there for my kid the way that my kid needs me.
Right. Yeah,
Can I be angry? My kid, I don't want my kid to be angry
Sure.
with me. Oh my God, are you kidding me? You're a parent, deal with it.
Yeah, get over it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you said something that, it reminded me of an analogy I always make I say it to my wife all the time. Like when the anxiety's going up in the house and the kids do something, I always say, and I say this, I say, put your oxygen mask on first. Wanda, to my wife's name is Wanda. Like, in other words, let's calm ourselves down. And I require the same reminder all the time myself. It's like, you can't, you said, you have to be your nervous system has to be in the right state to help your son in that example. I feel like that's true in so many situations, right? Where a parent is just, whether if they're in a super high anxiety state, they're not going to be able to cope with whatever's going on. They're not going to be able to comfort the child. They're not, whatever the situation may be. And it's always like that. I always think with the oxygen mask in the airplanes, put yours on first, because if and then help your loved ones, because if you're passing out from lack of oxygen, everyone's going to die, right? It's an extreme example, but that analogy always rang true with me, and it sounds like that's an example you just kind of.
We use it all the time, Vinny.
Oh, really?
We use that. We use it all the time.
Okay,
yep.
Cool.
Yep,
yeah.
And it's very, very true. Yes. And I think I want to say something else about that, where it's also important for kids to be able to be in the environment of conflict and regulate the nervous system and know and see how conflict can be resolved.
Yeah.
So
you brought this up last time we spoke, and I'm glad you brought it up again. Yeah, because no, you did, and the reason I remember was, that was a couple of years ago now, but it was because I learned from that, and I've literally implemented that behavior in my house. You said to me, and I don't know how you phrased it, but obviously this is your world, so you phrase it very well. But you basically said you don't need to shield and hide conflict from your children at all costs. You want to show them conflict exists and it can be resolved in a healthy way. And I think that's what you're just about to get at again. I think it's wonderful that you bring that up again because it's so important, right?
Yes, and that's exactly it. You have a great way of boiling things down and saying them in just regular language. I really appreciate that about you.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's good that because I'm kind of dumb in this area, so I have to boil it down. So it's kind of a win-win. It's a good thing.
Yes, it is a good thing.
I'm not too smart on it. That's perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your podcaster role, you're doing a very good job of that.
I appreciate it.
But yes, it is really important. And so for kids to know, mommy and daddy are disagreeing right now. And you are feeling it, like you validate them. This is conflict. This is stressful. This is real. And we resolve it. And how do we resolve it? And we do that with our children too. I mean, I've had so many difficult conversations with my son and said, okay, so we're going to sit, we're going to talk. And yes, I'm angry. And my voice is a little bit louder. I'm not yelling and screaming. But for a little one, a parent's voice getting louder and firmer, it's very scary.
Yeah.
I know it was scary for me.
Yeah.
So again, the self-awareness, letting them know, because I've worked with many clients, is that I never saw my parents fight. Everything was always great. I don't have any skills of how to deal with conflict. They weren't equipped for, you're saying, the real world.
Yeah.
I got to help. That's my job as a parent, is equip my kid with how they're going to function in the real world. And that's about, and I love bringing it back to the nervous system. I love that, excuse me, the in the 90s was the decade of the brain, they call it, with a lot of this research and coming out about how our nervous system is impacted and what we can do to modulate it and regulate it. So we can talk about it through biology versus there's something wrong with you mentally. No, this is about your nervous system. This is about your brain and all the nerves that go throughout your body and what kind of skills. And it is important to be in a safe place. We go back to IFS. If it doesn't feel safe, then I have protectors, managers and firefighters that develop in order to protect me. And I do come into the world, according to Schwartz, with the self, the spiritual, some people call it the spiritual self, some people call it the wise self. These are spiritual energies, and Dr. Schwartz is doing a lot with people like Jack Kornfield, with Buddhist psychologists and other spiritualities, talking about the self, the qualities of these 8 C words, compassion and curiosity and confidence and I don't remember what I said, courage and connectedness and calm and creativity, confidence. What did I miss?
I think you hit
maybe one or two of them.
Curious, calm, connected, creative, confident, compassion, clarity, courage.
There you go, clarity. So
for those just listening,
we do come in, we come in with those, and life happens. We say trauma happens. Life happens. Socialization happens.
Right. Yep.
We have feelings about it. We can feel hurt. We can have our needs not met. We can have these things happen. They're not natural disaster. They're not physical sexual abuse, but they happen and our protectors and firefighters develop. That doesn't mean we have to be in therapy the rest of our lives. It means this is how we develop. And can we be aware of them and how they work for us and sometimes maybe against us at this point as adults?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating stuff. So I know we've been going for almost an hour now. So I did want to get your take on what you've seen over the past with COVID, just to give I love asking folks that are in your field what the impacts they've seen, and for me it helps. And I don't want to get political with anything, but it always helps me understand what's going on in the world, and should we lock down everyone? How bad is isolation for humans, and all these things? I don't, sometimes I don't know if it makes the news as much, or people don't appreciate that as much. It's just like, well, virus, everyone go hide for. But all these things have the solution can't be worse than the cause, and the thing you're trying to solve. And so, I mean, what have you seen in your practice? And I don't know whether it relates to IFS or not, but even regardless, what have you seen over the past couple of years with what we're dealing with?
Our ability we are social beings, and connection for us, heart-to-heart connection, is critical for our mental health, our physical health, and our spiritual health as human beings, period.
Yep.
So I could tell you that the age of the internet and texting and computer connection is definitely impacting us in a negative way. There's also positives to it, but if we're looking, and there's going to be research, I don't know if it's out yet, but there's definitely research already happening about the generation that's growing up with this, that's not outside playing with their friends the way that we used to.
Yeah.
We were never in the house. I was never in the house.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
we were all right.
Oh, yeah. My mother would say, get out of the house and come back for dinner. I mean, that's exactly, and we didn't see it till 5.
And it is a different world now. Yeah. And so and I'm going to get to COVID in a second, but I don't want to make it just about COVID. I want to make it about connection.
Yeah, that's what it is,
how
right?
important connection is, and whatever's going to disconnect is going to negatively impact us. I'll say it that way. So with COVID, we've definitely been negatively impacted because people are isolated. People who live alone, my son moved to Cincinnati in January of 2020, was just starting. He works for a small company that doesn't have people his age. He's 27. He needs people his age, right? So March, COVID hits, lockdown hits. He's in his apartment by himself, working from home. How is he supposed to meet people? How is he supposed to get connected there? He lived by himself. He was isolated for a year. I mean, I have a wife. I'm not isolated. I have her or whatever. So absolutely, it's affected mental health. The depression, the amount of depression and anxiety has gone up significantly. They know domestic violence. If you think about people who were stuck in the house, so domestic violence went up, sexual abuse went up, people couldn't get away, addiction like crazy. And at the treatment center that I run groups at, the healthcare professionals that are coming in and the PTSD that they've developed now because of the environment that they have worked in. You talk about overwhelm of your nervous system, 14-hour shifts when you can't go to the bathroom. People are dying, 5 and 7 people on a shift for a nurse. The families can't be there, so they're the ones who are holding their hand with the iPad up and possibly not. I mean, you have to consider the implications of all of this. Yeah. And it is devastating, and the mental health consequences will be for years, no question. Yeah. And then there's like incredible things like Zoom and whatever you're using right now for video platform that I've been able to connect with people all over the world because of that I would never connect with through Psychodrama, which is my professional community, has the explosion of creativity of how to do this work and connect people online. It's just mind blowing. Yeah. So the creativity that's come out of it has been amazing as well. But yes, it's very difficult, and I won't get into should we lock down, should we not. That's not I'm not going there. But I can say that we have a physical, we have a pandemic, we have a health crisis, we have a mental health crisis, and it's about how do we want to serve the people and pay attention to what's happening mental health wise to our nervous systems from this. It's not one thing's bad of doing it. It's can we pay attention to how it's impacting and what services can we put in place? That's where I get angry. That's where I want to advocate, is because we don't pay enough attention to mental health and the impact it's having and provide the services for the people. The first responders, all those people, they need free services. If I want to get on a soapbox, it's like, that's what they need, and we should provide it for them. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it does. It does 100%. I mean, it's exactly what I thought you'd say, to be honest, in terms of, I mean, I just, like I said, I don't even want to take a position either way. All I know is that isolation needs to be considered as a problem as well. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's effects of that. Like you said, it may have been the best thing we had to do. I mean, we thought we were all going to die, right? So we not without even getting political, all I would say is, the effects of isolation, I feel like need to be forefront. That yes, maybe this is the best. Maybe just for the sake of argument, maybe it is what we had to do. And then, but okay, now what are the consequences, right? And I think, like you mentioned, you mentioned social media and the internet and what you and I think this is a great supplement to human interaction, but it's not a replacement. I mean, if I was in the room with you right now, I would kind of, I slap you on the shoulder, you see my face, you'd hug. You'd see my, it's just, there's something that's so human about that. I don't think we can replace. And what have we had technology for? I mean, internet, 20 years, 25, whatever it was. I mean, our human genome has been evolving for how many hundreds of thousands of years? Like, we're not ready for this. Our body still needs to, we still need to be social. We need to see other people. This needs to be confrontation, needs to be love, needs to be like physical confrontation or consequences if you say the wrong thing. All that stuff goes out the window with this internet world. And I think it's really, I agree with you. I think those studies coming out should be interesting. I'd like to, I know it's early, but I'd love to see the impact on humanity. And with a lot of kids, like you said, are growing up and this is their default. It's screens. It's not outside with their friends. That's like, get outside. Why? And you're kind of like, how do I convince them going outside is good when the dopamine in front of them on that screen is just, it's such a powerful force.
It's so powerful.
It's so force.
That's right.
It's like a drug. Why would I go outside? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy. It's just crazy. But in solitary confinement, I just looking at my notes here, like that's like a punishment, like in prison for a reason, right? And I just wrote that down, like just thinking about that. I'm like, and I'm lucky too. And I think, you had a partner there and I had a family here. So in a house that we have plenty of room, it's like, it was probably a lot worse for a lot of folks. So I just, if they're listening, don't, the effects they're going through are probably very real and they should just recognize them.
Absolutely. No
help.
question.
Yeah.
And like you said, I like what you said about, it's a substitute, but it can't be a replacement, something like that. It's,
yeah.
So there's a lot, the new piece in my field is online therapy.
Yeah.
Because that's what we needed to do. We went to a video platform during COVID, and people were still able to make this kind of connection.
Sure. Yep.
And I'm with you. It's not a replacement for being with somebody in person. And so I was on both ends of it. I was a therapist. I also was a client and am a client because I'm in my own therapy online. And again, pluses and negatives, we can talk about that another time. But the neurons that connect with each other very much so can do it through the computer, but when you're in person, that's when it happens. And so I agree with you. There is no replacement. And I'm concerned about the development of the nervous system when there's all of this replacement, like this substitution. So I'm glad we're having the conversation. That's what we need to do is just have the conversation, Vinny, and bring it up,
Well, in closing, I guess, people, I kind of have my notes here. I mean, so folks listening that can identify with a lot that we've gone through, what is the first step for them? I mean, where could they get help? What do you recommend? I mean, there's a million options for them. Obviously, hopefully they have the energy and the courage, I should say, to do something. What do you recommend they do as a first step?
Well, I like what you said about courage. That's one of the C words. That's one of the self-leadership words. So the first thing, if this internal family systems interests you at all, just go on and Google internal family systems and ifs-institute. It's either org or com. I don't remember. That is for the Institute, and you can get the professional information there. Vinny, I know you watch some YouTube videos. So it's one of the gifts of the internet is we can get that information.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yep.
So we can go on and get that information. And the Institute, if you go on their website, they have a Find a Therapist tab where you can go and put in your zip code, and you can find a therapist who's trained and certified in IFS, and reach out and make a call and say, I heard this podcast. It's really interesting to me. Can you help me with this? So that's one way. Psychologytoday.com is a very big resource for mental health professionals. And again, you go on psychologytoday.com and it'll say find a therapist, and you type in your zip code, and you'll have therapists come up, and people that you'll see their picture. They write a little bit about themselves and about their work, about their policies. Do they take insurance? Do they not? The kind of populations they work with. So you get to feel out a little bit of, would this person be somebody I want to reach out to? And so that's another just very easy resource. And I would give those two to not overwhelm right now. And I would say connect with people you feel safe enough with. And if you don't have anybody in your world that you feel safe enough with to connect on a heart level, then please reach out to a professional, because that kind of connection is so critically important for all of your health. We know it affects your immune system. We know, and we all need really robust immune systems right now. We need to do everything we can to be as healthy as we can in all ways, because otherwise we're not going to fight the virus. You're going to get sick. I mean, that's one of the things that's happening. And with COVID or anything else. So that would be what I'd recommend. And absolutely, people could go to my website, adinabankleys.com. I have a YouTube channel. They can put me in YouTube, and I have different videos a lot on covert emotional incest, which is what we talked about last time. I'm very open. If people want to, from my website, they want to email me, ask me questions, etc. I like to be a resource for people, so I want them to know that.
Sure. We'll go from there. Well, Dina, this was great. It's It's been 2 years, but I love talking to you.
Same here.